So hello and good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whenever you're watching this. I am Zakiya Monique, Master Relation Strategy, let me try that again. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, I am Zakiya Monique, Master Relationship Strategist, Transformational Speaker, Bestselling Author, Affiliate Connections, and I am also the facilitator of the Sunday School Remix, Safe Space, Resetters Crew. Like we have so much that we can offer to you. But the safe space is my complimentary group in which you can come and start your healing process. So if you're not a part of that, you will want to come to www.zmsafespace.com. So today we're on part 4 of our series, A Long Walk, Walking with the Children of Israel. And part 4 is dedication. But I want you to understand that we're going to see what one-sided dedication looks like, right? Because this is not dedication by any means of the children of Israel, but it is more of a dedication of God to the children of Israel because of the promise that he made to the forefathers. So they're thinking that, their mindset is almost like he owes them something, but the truth is he is going above and beyond for the ancestors of theirs that he made promises to. So when we say dedication, we're talking about God's dedication to them, even though they repeatedly showed him that they were ungrateful, they were entitled, they just had this murmuring, complaining attitude, and he still stuck to what he promised their forefathers. And God is that way with us. He's long suffering, but the problem is we never know when the long suffering is up, when the grace is up. And so, because he said, my grace is sufficient, he did not mean my grace is sufficient for you to keep sinning. My grace is sufficient for you to keep on murmuring and complaining. My grace is sufficient for you to keep taking me for granted like he didn't. And we don't know when God's grace may be up. We don't know when he'll say, enough is enough, I'm done. We don't know that, right? We don't know. And for those who may say, well, God never does that, that's not true. He will hand you over to a reprobate mind. A reprobate mind means you've already declared that it's going to be your way. I take my hands off. Okay. And I know people who have been handed over to reprobated minds, and I saw what happened to them, and it was not good. So it's not that God will harm you. He will take that covering. He will take that hand of protection. He will take that hedge of protection off of you, because when you say you don't want him, you're saying you don't want that either. And that's what I don't understand, why we don't understand that when we give God a no, when we tell God anything other than an emphatic yes, we're telling him we don't want him or his benefits. We can't keep the benefits, but not have him. I don't understand why we can't grasp that concept. Right? So we're talking dedication of God today, definitely not the children of Israel, because they in no way were dedicated to him. Our scriptures today, I thought I took Deuteronomy 8 off. I'm sorry, Deuteronomy 8 is not here. Well, to be honest with you, Deuteronomy 8 does apply. It really does, because in this area, he again keeps saying, don't forget me. Deuteronomy 8, he tells us, don't forget me. When I bring you the thing that you prayed for, the thing that you asked for, the thing that you fasted for, the thing that you labored for, the thing that you cried for in the middle of the night, don't forget me. So it really does apply. I used it last week, but it really does apply. But that the Exodus 15:22 and 18:27 are applicable for this week. But Deuteronomy 8 applies this week also, because you're going to see just in a few minutes how he told them the same thing. He wanted their future generations to remember. So he kept telling them, share this, save this, because I want you to tell them the stories. I want you to tell them how I saved you, how I saved you all. Tell them. So God is reminding us that as we come into our promised lands and as we come into the things that he blesses us with, he wants us to remember him too. Not just remember his hand, but remember his heart. Okay? So what is dedication? What does it mean? So dedication is the quality of being committed to a task or a purpose, a feeling of very strong support for or loyalty to someone or something. So when we're dedicated to a person or thing, that's what that means. A dedication is the act, I should have said, the act of devoting something to a particular subject or person. So when we dedicate something, you dedicate a school to somebody, or dedicate something, dedicate a fundraiser to some type of cause or something like that. That's what that's talking about. And then dedication is an act of setting apart or consecrating persons or things to God, persons, or sacred work. The act of being issued or performed in someone's honor. So that kind of extends the devoting something above it. It kind of takes it further where it says now you're extending this to God. You're devoting this to God. You're devoting this to sacred works, to persons, etc. Okay, and so the synonyms: commitment, consecration, blessing, sanctification. Okay, those are some of the words, and so you can see when we're committed, dedicated. Consecration and sanctification is when we're setting something apart for a specific use, like we are set apart for God's use. And then blessing. Oftentimes when we do a dedication of a church or something, it's really a blessing over that thing to be used a certain way. Okay, so that's what it means. So keep that in mind as we go through the lesson. So let's talk about God's dedication. Remember, that's what we're talking about this time. We're talking about God's dedication to the children of Israel and to his promises that were made to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And we'll see how the children of Israel respond. Okay. So let's start in Exodus 15, 22 through 27. Because when we left off at the top of the earlier part of 15, they were celebrating. They were celebrating because the Lord had parted the Red Sea for them, allowed them to walk in with the waters up on the sides as walls. That's what the Bible says. It says that the waters were raised up on the sides of the children of Israel as if they were walls, and they walked through on dry land. But after they got through, the Egyptians thought they were going to walk through too, and God said, put the staff up, and the waters came down and drowned the Egyptians. And God had promised them that through Moses, that the enemies that they saw that day, they would see no more. And they watched the Egyptians drown that were after them. And so they were they were initially upset because they said, God, you brought me all this way to leave me. And he's thinking, no, I didn't. Okay. And so that was their first response was, you brought us out of bondage and now you're going to let them get us again. And God was like, no, I didn't bring you out of bondage for you to return to bondage. I got you. Right. So they were celebrating at the top of 15. They were celebrating and they were excited. They were singing songs and they were playing tambourines and they were doing all these things because they were so excited that God had rescued them. And when you get down to the latter part of 15, it says, then Moses made Israel set out from the Red Sea, and they went into the wilderness of Shur. They went 3 days into the wilderness and found no water. Remember, they were supposed to go into the wilderness. They were supposed to go into the wilderness and they were supposed to worship and praise God or whatever, right? And that's what they had initially asked Pharaoh for. He kept telling Pharaoh, let the people go so that we can go into the wilderness. And he kept saying, yo, you can praise him here. He said, no, we can't. We have to praise him. We have to go into the wilderness and praise. It's a certain way God wants us to do this thing, right? And so now they're finally getting a chance to go into this wilderness or whatever. And then they're like, but we don't have no water. So they're like, we don't have no water. And then they found Mara. But then they couldn't drink of Mara because Mara was bitter. So that's why they named it Mara. So they're like, well, what are we going to do? We can't, we found some water. First we had to find the water. We found the water. Now we can't drink the water. And so what was their initial response? Their initial response was, so you brought us out here to thirst, to be thirsty and to not, have any water. What we gonna do? Die of thirst? They were just celebrating. They were just celebrating all that time. And not, 3 days? 3 days later, they forgot already. They already forgot. And so here's the thing. Their first response was murmuring. Despite all the miracles they had seen thus far, their first response was murmuring. And so then Moses cried out to the Lord, and the Lord showed him a log or tree. Okay, one version says God showed him a tree, and another one says that he showed him a log to cast into the water, and the waters were made sweet. And the point that I want to make off of this is that God often gives us unorthodox direction when we ask him for something. I've said this to my I've said this before to my audiences and to my, my groups and crews, is that you may say, Lord, I want you to, I want a husband. And he'll tell you, go fold the socks. And you're like, what does folding socks got to do with what I asked you? Right? They asked him for water and he gave them a tree, gave them a log. Now, what if they had not followed instructions? They would have died of thirst. And so if we trust God with the what, we have to also trust God with the how. Even if the how does not match how we feel it should be done. Because his ways are not our ways, his thoughts are not our thoughts. So when they said, Lord, we need water, and he said, here go a log, it's not up to us to say, well, he shouldn't have gave us a log, he should have just gave us some syrup to make the water sweet. He used what he wanted to use. And so he told them, cast the log into the water, and it's going to make the water sweet. Now, in my mind, I wouldn't have been thinking about the sap of a tree or something like that that could have possibly, I would have been thinking about nature being healing or whatever. I wouldn't have been thinking about that. I'd have been thinking about, I asked you for water, you gave me a log. You know what I'm saying? But if they had not followed what he told them to do, they would have died of thirst. And we have to, especially in this perilous time, we must follow what he tells us to do, how he tells us to do it, even if it does not make sense, because sometimes it'll make sense later and sometimes it won't. Sometimes it won't, because maybe it mattered to somebody else. See, we don't know how many times we've been an answer to somebody else's prayer that we had nothing to do with. And everything ain't our business. If we want to keep screaming, use me, Lord, then we have to understand and get comfortable with being uncomfortable sometimes, because sometimes we won't know what the ending part has anything to do with anything. We don't know. We're like, I don't know what that meant. I often tell a story about the lady who was at the bus stop, and I was at the Family Dollar. She was at the bus stop in front of the Family Dollar, and it was extremely hot. It had to be about 95 to 100 degrees that day. And so I parked in the shade, cut my air on in the car, and I was waiting for my aunt. So I decided to take a quick nap. And I was like, I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna stay right here and catch me a quick nap in this air, And the spirit said, go ask that lady, do she want to ride? And I'm thinking, we don't do that. The spirit said it again. I said, no, we don't do that. And then the spirit said it again. I said, well, what if she's going too far? She might be going too far to the end of the bus ride. I got to meet my auntie. And so after the spirit wouldn't let me rest, I went ahead and said, ma'am, I don't usually do this. I said, but, do you need a ride? And she said, I don't usually do this, but I'm going to take this ride. And she got in the car, and I asked her where she was going. And she was only going, maybe 5 minutes up. And so I kind of breathed easy, when I said, okay, all right, she's not going to the end of the bus stop, right? And so as I was talking, she said to me, I sure am glad you came, because I was just praying to the Lord that I would, that something would happen, that I would get the bus or somebody would come, because she said she felt like she was going to faint. Now, if she would have never shared that story with me, I would have never known. But was it for me to know? No, it's just for me to obey. It's just for me to obey, because maybe that increased her faith. So if we're going to ask God to use us and all of that, we can't always know. Sometimes we have to be comfortable with not knowing why we were a part of whatever this is, but just obey. Just obey. Okay. And so, obedience is the key to blessings, because look at the next thing that he said. It says, and the people began to, grumble against Moses. What should we drink? And he cried to the Lord. The Lord gave him a log. He threw it in there, and the water became sweet. And there the Lord made them a statute and a rule, and there he tested them, saying, if you diligently, and I'm reading from the ESV, I'm sorry, so if it sounds different. If you diligently listen to the voice of the Lord your God, and do that which is right in his eyes, and give ear to his commandments, and keep all his statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you that I put on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord your healer. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 springs of water and 70 palm trees, and they encamped there by the water. So he basically told them, listen, if you do what I say, if you hear me, you heed, if you do, why is he telling them that? Because he's like, I need you to obey. I'm not against you. I need you to obey. He told them that because obedience is the key to blessings, and it still is. God promised them that if they would listen, heed, and obey, none of the diseases that they had just watched happen to the Egyptians would be brought upon them. But guess what? This still stands today. But we have we have even a greater sacrifice in Jesus that was wounded for our transgressions, yet obedience is still required. We just have grace when we fall short. But that same grace and strength is designed to help us not keep falling short in that same area. And so oftentimes when God tells us, hey, I need you to go on a fast, that very fast may be clearing our body of an illness. That very fast may be healing us and we don't even know it. That very fast may be saving our loved one or saving our life. We don't even know it. It's just for us to obey. And don't get me wrong, it's hard. And sometimes we miss the mark because we're not perfect, but it's just for us to have a habit of obeying without having to know all of the details. But he promised them, if you just listen. Why is he promising them this? Because he's saying, I need you to get on the same page with me. I'm dedicated to you. Get on the same page with me. Okay? So now we're moving into the next part of the dedication, which is provision in the wilderness of sin. Oh, that was the actual name of the wilderness, which I thought was very interesting. But provision in the wilderness of sin, manna and meat. So it talks about how they set out from Elim. They left that place where they were before. And all of the congregation of, the people of Israel that came to the wilderness of sin, they all were there together. And sin, the wilderness of sin was in between Elim and Sinai. So they were in between the two. So it talks about how they kept grumbling. They grumbling once again because they hungry this time. So they basically said to Moses, in other words, verse 3 says, would that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the meat pots and ate bread to the full, for you to have brought us out into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. So they basically were saying, at least in Egypt we was eating. At least in Egypt we didn't starve. At least in Egypt we wasn't hungry. Never mind the fact that they was beaten. Never mind the fact that they were worked to death. Never mind the fact that they were mistreated. Never mind the fact that they even made their jobs harder by saying, we ain't giving y'all no straw. No, they forgot about all of that. They forgot about all of that. They forgot about the fact that God just had to throw a log in the water to make it sweet for you. Put 10 plagues against the Egyptians for you. Part of the whole Red Sea for you. And you still talking about, what should we have just, Then the Lord said to Moses, behold, once again, he's showing his dedication. Behold, I am about to rain bread from heaven for you, and the people shall go out and gather a day's portion every day, that I may test them whether they will walk in my law or not. So he's still trying to see, are you on the same page with me? I'm going to prove you by saying, go get 1 day's work. I'm going to feed you every day. Depend on me every day. Just go get 1 day's work. That's it. He said, I want to see if they're going to follow me or not. But then he told them on the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather daily. Why was he telling them this? Because the Sabbath day, he didn't want them to go out there. Ain't going to be no man on the Sabbath day. So I'm going to give you enough for 2 on the 6th day. So he gave them specific instructions. Like we talked about last week, God gave them specific instructions. God gives us specific instructions. He told me, go ask that lady to go here, go do this, go do that. Okay. Specific instructions. It's up to us to follow exactly how he tells us to do something, because that matters too. The timing matters too. It says, so Moses and Aaron said to the people of Israel, at evening you shall know that it was the Lord that brought you out of the hand of Egypt, and in the morning you shall see the glory of the Lord. He heard your grumbling, and listen, he gonna give us meat in the evening to eat, and morning we gonna have bread to the full, because he has heard your grumbling. He's heard your grumbling, that you grumble against him. What are we? Your grumbling is not against us, but it's against the Lord. He said, why y'all keep attacking us? We are here for the Lord. And you keep grumbling against him, but he's done all this for you. Then Moses said to Aaron, say to the whole congregation of the people of Israel, come near before the Lord. He has heard your grumbling. And as soon as Aaron spoke to the congregation, they looked toward the wilderness, and the glory of the Lord appeared in a cloud. And the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the people of Israel. Say to them, at twilight you shall eat meat, and in the morning you shall be filled with bread. Then you shall know that I am the Lord your God. In the evening, what happened? Just what the Lord said. Quail came up and covered the camp. And in the morning dew lay around for the camp. And when the dew had gone up, there was on the face of the wilderness a fine flake-like thing, fine as frost on the ground. That was their bread. When the people saw it, they said, well, what is it? For they didn't know what it was. And Moses said to them, it is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. So it wasn't anything that they had ever recognized before. It was a different type of bread. And that's why they named it something different, but it was a different type of bread. And it says, this is what the Lord has commanded. Gather of it, each one of you, as much as he can eat. You shall take in omer. And omer was a tenth of a bushel. A tenth of a bushel. According to the number of persons that each of you has in his tent. And the people of Israel did so. They gathered some more, some less, depending on the number of people they had, right? But when they measured it with an omer, whoever gathered much had nothing left over, and whoever gathered little had no lack. Each of them gathered as much as he could eat. And Moses said to them, let no one leave any of it over till the morning. Don't, what did he say? Don't leave none, don't save none. But they ain't listening to Moses. Some left part of it to the morning, and what happened? It bred worms and it started stinking. And Moses was angry. Why? What did I say? What did I tell y'all? Why y'all don't listen? Understand this, God is certainly not required to provide for us, especially in the wilderness of sin, okay? But oftentimes he still makes provisions for us. He still keeps his hands on us, even when we are in sin or when we sin or in sin, because oftentimes he knows what the end will be. He knows who's going to serve him and he knows who's not. God sometimes keeps his hands on us because he's protecting his investments. I can speak for me. He knew from the beginning of this, before I was in my mother's womb, he knew what I would be. And so along the way, I believe, this is my belief, that he protected the investment that he made in me when I was out here doing what I felt I wanted to do. It is a fact that God remains faithful to his word even when we're faithless. And so, once again, despite the previous provisions that he had made, the children of Israel were here again, murmuring about hunger. He decides to feed them, but wanted to prove their obedience. He done already told them the promise that he had for them. He done already told them, listen, this is how I want you to do it. I'm going to rain down enough every day. I'm going to take care of you every day. You don't have to worry about it. I'm going to rain down every day. You're going to have meat at night. You're going to have bread in the morning. Don't worry about it, but don't take more than you need, and don't try to save none for the next day. Because if you're trying to save something for the next day, what you're saying is you don't trust me to provide for you for tomorrow. But what did they do? They tried to keep some for the next day anyway, and it rotted. It rotted. God will often prove our character just to see what we will do and what he can trust you with. We be praying for millions, and he like, I can't even trust you with thousands. You got your check, you got your income tax, and forgot all about me. But here's the beauty of it all. When the Sabbath day came and it was time for them to observe the Sabbath, you can read the remainder of 16 on your own. But when it was time for them to reverence the Sabbath and they had to keep food, guess what? The food didn't stink and it didn't breed worms. Same food, same amount of time. But the difference is God's covering and protection and his leadership and direction. They did nothing different. They tried to keep the manna and the meat on another day. And then when it was the Sabbath day, they tried to keep the manna and the meat. That day when they weren't supposed to keep it, it rotted. Why? It didn't have God's blessings. I heard Keon Henderson one day say a blessing out of season can become a curse. Sometimes it's out of time. It ain't time yet. It wasn't time to keep the meat and manna at that time. It wasn't time for that. He said, I'll tell you when. I'll tell you when. And so Moses told them, he said, listen, there'll be no gathering in the observance of the Sabbath And you know, you don't even need to go to the field or nothing. You don't need to do none of that because it ain't gonna be no manna or none of that. So you can save what you have on day 6. And when they saved what they had on day 6 for day 7, it didn't spoil, it didn't breed worms. But guess what they did? They got up and went anyway to see if it was something, that they could collect, see if they can go gather. Didn't he tell you it wasn't gonna be nothing to gather? Why did you have to go see? But ain't that how we do? God to tell us don't do this, or you don't need to do this or do that. We got to go see. We got to go see. Because sometimes we can't walk by faith. We got to walk by sight. We just need to see. They went and saw, and guess what they saw? That it was nothing there. Nothing at all. And then later on, God directed them to keep some manna to show God's provision to the future generations. Remember, I told you, Deuteronomy 8, don't forget me. Why he keeps saying, don't forget me? Just like he did when he did all of the miracles and the plagues in Egypt. He said, I want you to go tell your generations, right? Well, this time he's telling them again, I want you to go tell your generations about my provisions so that they will believe in me too, so that I don't have to fight with them either, so that we will be on the same page. Why? Because I am going to keep the same promises with them. I'm going to keep the same promises with them, and I don't want to have to fight them to bless them. I don't want to have to fight them to bless them, and I don't want to have to take them through a 40-year wilderness for something that could have been 11 days because of how they respond. So I want you to go tell your future generations. He did the same thing. He said, go tell them. Go tell them. And so they put some manna aside to keep as the Lord had commanded. And guess what? The children of Israel had manna 40 years. He took care of them 40 years, like he said he would every day. You don't got to worry about it. You don't got to save none. Until the 6th day, you ain't got to save nothing. I'm going to take care of you every day. And he did. He did. Okay. So then we move to Exodus 17, provision in Rephidim. Rephidim. So this is a little bit different. This is water and victory. So we move over to chapter 17 again. Don't forget to read, the remainder of chapter 16. But as we go into 17, one of the references that I did see that I did not type here is Numbers 20, verses 1 through 13. So if you want to read that to get a better understanding of what's happening here, it's over in Numbers. Numbers 21 through 13 references the water from the rock. And then while you're writing, when we get down to the part about Amalek, we have a couple of references: Genesis 14:7, Numbers 13:29, and Numbers 14:25. So once again, Genesis 14:7, Numbers 13:29, and Numbers 14:25. These are just some references that the Bible that I'm using gives. So I'll give those references for you to read to better understand the story and to see how it's further elaborated upon in those areas. So we get to chapter 17. It says, all the congregation of the people of Israel moved on from the wilderness of sin by stages, according to the commandment of the Lord, and camped at Rephidim. But there was no water for the people to drink. So here we go again. He's like, okay, let me prove you. Because when there wasn't no water last time, I threw we threw that rock, or that, not rock, I'm sorry, we threw the log into the water. No problem. Sweet water, you can drink it. So if I solved the problem before, then let's see how you respond again. Here we go. Verse 2. Therefore, the people quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. And Moses said to them, why are you quarreling with me? Why do you test the Lord? Why? Why y'all test the Lord? But the people thirst there for water, and they began to do what? Grumble against Moses and said, why you bring us out of Egypt to kill our kids and our livestock and kill us from thirst? They responded the exact same way. The exact same way. So Moses cried to the Lord and said, what am I gonna do with these people? They ready to stone me. And I know Moses was probably like, and I'm tired of them too. I'm about tired of them too. And the Lord said to Moses, pass on before the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, and go. Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock of Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and the water gonna come out of it, and people gonna drink. And Moses did so in the sight of the elders of Israel. And what happened? He struck it, and the water struck the rock, and the water came out. Boom. Problem solved. Problem solved. So they tested the Lord. How? Because they kept saying, is the Lord with us or not? Oh. You got to ask. With everything he's done so far, you got to ask, is he for you? But here's the thing. In our humanness, sometimes we wonder. You know, I personally may not have said, is he with me or not? I probably would have been like, did I do something wrong to get from under his care? Okay. Now that's often my question. If something's wrong, I don't say, was he ever for me? Because I know he was. But my question is, Lord, did I move? Did I do something wrong? Let me check me first. Okay. But here's the thing. Here's what happens. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So in other words, Amalek came and attacked them. Now, I had to check my studies because I'm like, wait, where did Amalek come from? Like, why? You know what I'm saying? Why? These people have been slaves for 450 years in Egypt. So where Amalek come from to have beef with them, right? So I'm just trying to figure out what's going on. Well, my studies say that the Bible didn't say why in the text, but further studies indicate that the Amalekites were descendants of Esau, and the children of Israel were descendants of Jacob. So the dissension between Esau and Jacob did not really subside after they were gone, now did it? So we have to be careful how we handle conflict, because we could easily pass on our anger, our rage, our envy, or whatever it is down to our children, because, it could be said that the Amalekites were jealous because you don't think they heard about what God was doing for the Israelites, all that he had done? And then it's reminded them of how they're not the blessed tribe per se, because Jacob stole the birthright from our father. And so, of course, just imagine the dissension that it put, between their children through the years. These were cousins. These were cousins. These were two sons, two brothers' children. We have to be careful how we handle the conflict in our families, because our children will often take on and take our pain, or take what we're dealing with. They'll take it too. They'll take it too. So these were brothers. The Amalekites attacked when they thought the Israelites were vulnerable. These were brothers' children. These were cousins, carrying on beef from their father, but not just their father, from their grandmother too. Because don't you remember the grandma had something to do with it? She helped deceive her own husband. Why? Because she wanted Jacob to have the birthright? Oh, okay. But here's a very important figure that comes forward. Again, you can, I'm just pulling out some highlights. You can kind of read the word for word yourself. I just kind of want to bring some things out. Here we see Joshua. Here we see Joshua being raised up for leadership. This is the first time we hear about Joshua in the Bible. He was first a follower before he was entrusted to be a leader, because what was his first command? Go to war. His first command was to go to war. Oh, okay. His first command was, as in leadership, gather some troops, go to war. Moses told him, you gather some men, you go to war, you fight them, and guess where I'm going to be? I'm going to be on the top of the hill with the staff. Meaning I'm going to be helping you from up there. I need you to go fight the men. So you're going to do the physical fight, and I'm going to do the spiritual fight. Because remember, if you think about it, the text don't say this, but if you read and compare all of the times that they went up on hills, up on mountains, what did they do? They went to get away from the people so that they can hear better from the Lord, so they can be with the Lord, so they can hear what the Lord had to say. So he's going to the spiritual aspect of fighting. Joshua, you go to the physical aspect of fighting. Okay? So Joshua was in charge of choosing the men and going out to fight Amalek. Okay? So it says, so Joshua did, in verse 10, as Moses told him to do, and fought with Amalek, while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill. But the problem was, whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. Uh-oh. So what does that mean? It ain't rocket science. We got to keep his hands up. We got to keep his hands up. So let me go back really quick, first of all, to Joshua. Joshua was being raised up for leadership. Now, Moses didn't necessarily know that that's who was going to take his place. It didn't say that he did. But he was first a follower before he was entrusted to be a leader. I want to insert a couple points there. First of all, many times we will, we don't want to adhere to any training or guidance. In this generation now, we don't want to adhere to any training or guidance for some reason. God can reveal our calling, but that don't mean that we're ready for it that day. I remember somebody, I was talking to a young man, and he said, God told me I was going to be a preacher. I said, but he didn't tell you he was going to be one today. You need to get somewhere and let somebody groom you. Get somewhere and let somebody help you understand what's going to be required of you. Get somewhere and let somebody train you. He will lead us to someone who can guide us, but nowadays pride and envy will get in the way. So we don't want them to teach us nothing. Oh, the times are different. I don't need all that. Oh, okay. Joshua was sent to fight. That's your training for leadership. That's your training for leadership of these same people that you among. So he had been there all the time. Maybe not the whole time, but he had been there long enough to see what was going on. Right there in the midst. Why? Because I need you to see so that you know how to respond, so that you know what you're in for. So God is often training us for what's coming ahead by letting us sit and see and sit and be a part of it. I remember hearing T.D. Jakes preach about God put you with Saul so that you don't become Saul when it's your turn. So Joshua was sent to fight while Moses, Aaron, and Hur went up to the top of the hill with the rod of God in Moses' hand. And again, like I said, this was the first time that Joshua was mentioned, so it was likely his first assignment. Imagine your first assignment being go to war. Okay? And so the top of the hill could have a few meanings. Number one, mountaintop was where they always went to hear from God, but then it also could have been a clear view of the battle. I don't know. I'm not really sure on the, I have to dig a little deeper to go into how far away they were. But whatever the case was, when they were at that top, Moses' hands were heavy. And he was likely tired too. Just imagine all that bickering and complaining and grumbling and all that traveling. He was over 80 years old. I think he was 80 and Aaron was 83. And don't get me wrong, 80 and 83, they were eating well and they were, exercising because they were walking everywhere. So, and on animals and all that type of stuff. So, I mean, it was a little different, totally different than the foods and stuff that we have access to today. But I venture to say that if he wasn't physically tired, he sure was mentally tired of them children. The children is Israel's children, right? And so those around him noticed and sprung into action. So it didn't take them long to see that every time his hands dropped, they started losing. And so they said, oh no. So they grabbed some rocks. They put them rocks under his I imagine his elbows. It says, but Moses' hand grew weary, so they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. So not under his elbows, I apologize. They put it under him. And he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side, so his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joseph, why I keep calling him Joseph, and Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. So that means he won. We need some people around us who notice and move into action. We need some people around us who notice. And they don't have to be told. Moses probably didn't even have the strength to tell them what to do. But we need some people around us who know what to do. This is why we can't be jealous and envious and want to lead people out of fear. Because if everybody's scared around you and everybody depending on you and don't know how to do nothing, what happens if you need them to pray for you? What happens if you need them to cover you? Leaders get tired too. Okay? So we got to have some people around us that we have empowered, that we have taught, that we have, people will follow you even if you don't make them completely dependent upon you. See, it's the insecurity in us that will make us think that if we teach people something, they're going to go away. That's insecurity. We got to figure that out. We got to fix that. Because when you teach the people, they will still follow you if you're the leader. If you are meant to be the leader, if you're God's leader, they're still going to follow you. Even if you teach them everything to do, they still will follow you because God has ordained you for that leadership. You don't have to worry about them trying to overthrow you or whatever. If they didn't put you there, they can't take you down. But the problem is many leaders know that they put themselves up. And so they want somebody that's going, they don't want to empower people because if they do, those people will then move on and realize that they are not true leaders. Insecurity will cause you to be jealous. Insecurity will cause you to withhold information. Insecurity will cause you to make people be dependent upon you because you feel like that's the only way they'll stay. That's insecurity. You got to fix that. Okay? And so, like I said, they noticed that when his hands went down, they were losing. So they were like, oh no, we got to keep his hands up. But guess what? Guess why? It wasn't because of his hands. It was because what was in his hands. Because he had the staff of God. The staff of God represented power and authority. And so as long as they kept the power and authority up high, then they were winning. But when the power and authority waned, they started to lose. Isn't that synonymous in our lives? When we walk in power and authority, we win. When we walk in fear and doubt and all those things, we lose. And so it's the same thing. Okay, it's the same thing. And so you read the remainder of that, or read that in totality later. Why am I tongue tied today? Anyway, all right. So moving on to Exodus 18. Moving on to 18. Okay. Okay, let me get over there. So now we're up to Jethro's advice, provision and godly wisdom. Here's the thing: godly wisdom can often keep us from being weary. That's why it says that wisdom is on the right hand. I think it says is life. Riches is on one hand and life is on the other. Long life. Long life is often associated with wisdom simply because it keeps us from weariness. Wisdom will tell us what to do and what not to do. Wisdom will tell us it's not time for that. Wisdom will tell us don't go there. Wisdom will keep us out of situations that will overexert us, that will stress us out, right? So this is why wisdom is a weapon. We talked about that in our previous series, the weapons of in our spiritual tool chest. And so here we see Moses is talking to Jethro. Okay, Jethro, the priest of Midian, was Moses' father-in-law. And he had heard everything that God had done for Moses. So they were just, having a conversation. He knew that, the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. He had heard all these different things or whatever. And so he was just listening. They had a conversation. And he had already observed what Moses was doing. Moses was basically taking care of all of the people himself. Okay, he was judging all the people. They were all taken from him. And so it said in verse 14, when Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone and all the people stand around you from morning to evening?" So that means they were zapping from Moses from morning to evening. This is why he was tired. This is why he was tired. This is why he couldn't hold them hands up in battle, because the people was draining him every day. And if we're honest, we have people around us that may drain us every day too if we are not walking in godly wisdom. And Moses said to the father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statute of God and his laws." And Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you're doing is not good." Now, see, if we stop right there, most people will think he's saying that what you're doing is not good, teaching them about God, but that's not what he's saying. If we go further, he says, "You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the things is too heavy for you. You can't do this alone." He said, "Now obey my voice. I will give you advice and God be with you." In other words, he's saying, obey my voice. I'm going to give you the advice. It's up to you to do it. He says, "Listen, you shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God. And you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make them know the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe," which means they can't be bought, right? "And place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. And let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter shall be brought to you, but every small matter they'll decide themselves, so it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you. You will be able to endure. And all this people also will go to their place in peace." So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he said. Moses chose able men out of Israel, out of all Israel, and made them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, of tens, and they judged the people at all times. Any hard case was brought to Moses. Any small case, they decided themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went away to his own country. What if Moses would have been full of pride and said, "He ain't gonna tell me what to do. God used me already"? You know how many people do that? You know how many people feel like, you know what? You can't tell me nothing because I already got a relationship with God. It does not matter. It does not matter how deep we think we are in God. God can still use his people. He can still use someone to bring us a word and to bring us a revelation or a perspective that we had not considered. But oh no, Oh no, we think, oh no, I'm blessed and highly favored. I am a bishop. I am an apostle. I am a this. I am a that. No, I don't need to get a word from you. You are, who are you? I am the leader of the children of Israel. You are simply a man that has you're a chief or whatever you are in Midian, though. You're in Midian. I'm not from Midian or whatever. You can't tell me nothing. You know how many people take that approach and lose? You know how many people take that approach and lose? Simply because when somebody that they don't think is at their level tells them something, they feel like, I ain't got to listen to that. Who are you? But who are we to tell God who to use? I remember a lady saying that a single woman couldn't tell her nothing about a relationship. I said, well, how do you know that woman always been single? How do you know that that woman was always single? Maybe that woman was not always single. Maybe that woman had a mishap or a situation and she spent 15, 20 years in a marriage and maybe her husband died. Does that negate all 15, 20 years of her experience? It does not. But we have such an arrogant personality sometimes about who can tell us what. The Bible says, try the spirit to see if it's of God. It does not say try the spirit by the spirit. It don't say that. It says try the spirit to see if it's of God, which means that God will send some people to us that don't look like they should be telling us anything. Okay? Out of the mouth of a babe, out of the mouth of an ass. He can use whom he so chooses. If he can appear in a burning bush, he can do what he wants. He can use whom he pleases. But we will miss the message because we sizing up the messenger. We will miss the boat because it's not a yacht. I keep telling everybody, sometimes God will send you a sailboat. You just asked him to save you from drowning. You didn't tell him, save me in luxury from drowning. You said, save me from drowning, Lord. So he sent you a sailboat. He sent you a kayak. He sent you a rowboat. You said, that ain't the Lord. He would have sent me a yacht. And you missed it and drowned. And then you said it was God's fault. No, God said, I sent you 3 boats and you said it wasn't me. Because they didn't come the way you thought it was. You know how many people miss their husbands because the husband don't come the way they thought he should come? Looking like he should look according to them. I remember talking to a couple. I almost did the same thing, y'all. I could tell you because I almost did the same thing. But I was talking to a couple one time and a guy said that, he met a girl. He met this young lady. And when he met her, she was together. And he was not. And he was insecure, not about what he could provide her, not about who he was, but he was insecure because he felt like she didn't need him for anything. And he said he was getting ready to, stop talking to her because he felt like, what do I have to offer her? She's already together and I'm not. And he said, wait a minute. I'm not finna, cave to the challenge. I'm going to bring it up a notch. He was just in a bad situation temporarily. It wasn't his character that was poor. It wasn't, it was just at the time he was just in a bad situation that had him, just in a tight spot. Okay. And see, I often tell people there's a difference between a person that's broke right now and a person that's broke in mentality. See, if you got a poverty mentality, baby, I don't know what we can do about that. Okay. Because the Lord gonna have to touch your mind. He's gonna have to renew your mind. But if you just got a situation right now, then that's different. And so that young man stayed. He stayed with her and he built himself up. And that young woman had been told by a gentleman that she would never have a man that would get her a ring the way that she wanted it and propose to her and all of that. Her previous boyfriend had tried to curse her that way. And this gentleman who at one time did, had an old beat up car and she had a fancy car. He had an old beat up car. That gentleman pulled up one day in a very clean, very beautiful red truck with a ring for that young woman. And they are married still today with their children. What am I saying? What I'm saying is we have to remember that sometimes the way you meet a person is not the way that they'll always be. We have to understand that, hey, we have to check in with God because we don't know how God will come or how God's sin will come. We don't know. Right? We don't know. And who are we to say how God is going to send us love or how God's going to answer our prayer? But we will feel that if I'm struggling with a relationship, he would not send me somebody who is not currently married. He will send me somebody who's been married for 50 years. But that person who's been married for 50 years can be just as poisonous to you and your marriage as they are to their own. And so we have to stop putting God in a box, especially now, because God is getting ready to raise up a remnant and do some things differently, not apart from his word, but apart from what we think he would do because of the tradition that man has subjected us to for many years. We can't put him in a box because we'll miss them if we do. All right. So I'll stop at this time and take questions.